One choice. One moment. One love story. Welcome to When He Chose Her. Enjoy the story. The most expensive thing in that restaurant was not the wine, the chandelier, or the billionaire's watch. It was the silence that followed what his mother said. Rain slid down the tall windows of Bellamy and Rose, turning downtown Boston into a blur of headlights and silver streets. Inside, everything looked polished enough to hide a secret. Crystal glasses waited in perfect rows. White tablecloths held their corners like folded snow. Forks gleamed beneath warm gold light. And Nora Caldwell moved through it all with a tray balanced on one hand, her black apron tied neatly at her waist, her tired feet never once slowing down. She had been on shift for 9 hours. Her smile had carried 3 birthday dinners, 2 business arguments, 1 broken engagement she pretended not to hear, and a man at table 12 who had sent back his soup because it looked too emotional. Nora had simply nodded, because in restaurants like this, dignity often came with sore ankles. Then the front doors opened, and the room changed. Graham Whitaker entered first, tall, composed, and quiet in a charcoal suit that seemed made for rooms where people lowered their voices. Everyone knew him, or pretended they did. He owned hotels with marble lobbies, rooftop bars, and towels so soft guests mentioned them in reviews. Behind him came his mother, Evelyn Whitaker, wrapped in cream wool and diamonds, carrying herself like the building had been constructed for her approval and had already failed. The manager nearly tripped reaching the host's stand. "Mr. Whitaker, Mrs. Whitaker, welcome back." Evelyn did not look at him. "Let's hope tonight is less disappointing than last time." Nora heard it from across the room. She also heard the busboy whisper, "That's her being friendly." Nora almost smiled. Almost. Their table was in her section. Of course it was. The kind of luck that arrived wearing pearls. She approached with water glasses and a calm face. "Good evening. My name is Nora. I'll be taking care of you tonight." Graham glanced up from the menu. His eyes paused, not long, but long enough to notice she was not nervous. "Thank you, Nora." Evelyn looked at Nora's name tag, then at her shoes, then at the tray in her hand. "How sweet," she said. "They're using real names now instead of numbers." The table beside them went quiet. Nora poured the water without spilling a drop. "We found it helps people remember we're human, ma'am." Graham's fingers stopped against the menu. A tiny sound. Paper against skin. Evelyn's smile sharpened. "Charming." The first 10 minutes were ordinary in the way a storm is ordinary before the roof moves. Evelyn corrected Nora's pronunciation of a French dish, though Nora had said it correctly. She asked whether the salmon was farm-raised, wild-caught, or whatever arrives cheapest on Tuesdays. She requested lemon on the side, then complained it was too far to the left. Nora answered each line with patience so clean it almost looked rehearsed. Graham watched more than he spoke. Noticed how Nora refilled his mother's glass before she asked. Noticed how she shifted a candle away from Evelyn's sleeve without making a show of it. Noticed, too, that his mother noticed nothing. Then Evelyn lifted her silk napkin, dabbed the corner of her mouth, and let it slip from her fingers. It floated down slowly, pale and deliberate, landing beside Nora's shoe. No one moved. Evelyn leaned back. Her voice was soft, but it traveled. "Pick it up, dear. That's what people like you are trained for." The restaurant inhaled and forgot to exhale. A waiter froze near the wine station. The manager turned the color of skim milk. Even the piano player missed a note. Graham's face tightened. "Mother." But Nora had already bent down. She picked up the napkin with 2 fingers, not hurried, not ashamed. She smoothed it once, as though returning order to a world that had briefly misplaced it. Then she placed it on the table, perfectly folded, beside Evelyn's untouched salad fork. Her voice remained gentle. "Of course, ma'am. But just so you know, dignity is not something that falls to the floor." The silence changed shape. It was no longer awkward. It was listening. Evelyn blinked, as if no one had ever handed her back her own reflection without raising their voice. Graham looked at Nora fully now. Not at her uniform, not at the tray, at her. Nora stepped back with the smallest professional nod. "Your appetizers will be out shortly." Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen, every eye following her, every step calm, while behind her, the richest table in the room suddenly felt very poor. Behind the kitchen doors, the sound returned all at once. Plates clinked. A dishwasher hissed. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Nora set her tray down beside the service station and reached for the next order slip as if nothing unusual had happened. Her hands were steady. Too steady, maybe. The kind of steady that comes after years of teaching yourself not to shake where people can see. Marco, the sous chef, leaned through the pass with wide eyes. Nora Caldwell, remind me never to drop anything near you. She gave him a look. You dropped an entire tray of oysters last Thursday. Exactly. I am trying to survive. A small laugh moved through the kitchen, quick and nervous. Nora allowed herself half a smile before picking up 2 plates of crab cakes and a bowl of lobster bisque. Work did not stop because someone rich had been cruel. Rent did not pause. Medication did not pause. Her father's phone calls from home did not pause. So Nora kept moving. She delivered appetizers to table 8, corrected a missing allergy note before it reached the wrong guest, and guided a new server named Lily through a wine pairing with a whisper so smooth the customer thought Lily had known it all along. From across the dining room, Graham Whitaker kept watching her. He tried not to. He failed quietly. Nora did not perform her calmness. She lived inside it. That unsettled him more than if she had cried or stormed away. At his table, Evelyn cut into her salad with the precise irritation of a woman who believed lettuce could disappoint her personally. You should speak to the manager, she said. Graham picked up his water glass. About what? Evelyn looked at him as if he had forgotten his own last name. About that server. She did her job. She embarrassed me. Graham glanced toward Nora, who was now kneeling beside a little boy at table 5, helping him retrieve a crayon from under a chair without making his mother feel awkward. No, he said quietly. I think you handled that part yourself. Evelyn's fork stopped. For 1 second, her face lost its polish. Then it returned, colder. Do not be sentimental, Graham. People confuse kindness with weakness. That girl needed to be reminded where she stood. Graham looked at his mother's diamond bracelet, then at the napkin Nora had folded perfectly beside her plate. Maybe she did remind us. Evelyn laughed once. No warmth. You always did have a weakness for wounded things. He did not answer, because the truth was, Nora had not looked wounded. She had looked tired. There was a difference. The shift ended close to midnight. The rain had softened to a mist, and Bellamy and Rose emptied itself of perfume, leather shoes, and expensive laughter. Nora changed in the employee restroom, trading her polished black flats for worn gray sneakers. Her shoulders ached. Her calves burned. In the mirror, she examined her face the way she checked a table before service. Presentable. Controlled. No visible cracks. Lily, the new server, stepped in holding her coat. You were amazing tonight. Nora tied her hair into a loose knot. I was professional. No, you were terrifying. In a classy way. Nora smiled despite herself. That is going on my resume. Outside, she missed the first bus by 12 seconds. She watched the red taillights pull away from the curb and sighed so softly, even the rain almost missed it. The next one would come in 20 minutes. She pulled her coat tighter and sat beneath the covered stop, her phone glowing in her hand. 3 missed calls from home. Her chest tightened. She called back immediately. Her father answered on the second ring. Before you panic, I am alive, I am indoors, and I only called because the microwave is judging me. Nora closed her eyes with relief. Dad, the microwave is not judging you. It beeped 3 times. That felt personal. Walter Caldwell's voice was thin from illness, but the humor still held. It always did, even when his body did not. Nora leaned back against the cold glass panel. Did you eat? Yes. The soup. You left. Although I maintain it would be better if restaurants let you bring home one of those fancy desserts. Fancy desserts cost $18 and have 1 raspberry. Then steal the raspberry. I am trying to keep my job. A pause. Then Walter's voice softened. Hard night. Nora looked down at her hands. The fingers that had folded Evelyn Whitaker's napkin. The fingers that had once filled out scholarship forms. The fingers that now smelled faintly of lemon water and coffee. Nothing I could not handle. That means yes. She smiled faintly. A woman dropped her napkin and tried to drop my self-respect with it. Walter made a thoughtful sound. Rich. Very. Mother of rich. Worse. Ah, he said. A professional. Nora laughed for real this time, small but bright against the rain. Across the street, unseen by her, a Blacktown car waited at the curb. Graham sat in the back, his hand resting near the door handle, watching Nora smile into the phone like the whole evening had not cost her anything. For the first time in years, he did not know what move to make next. The next morning, Graham Whitaker stood in the private elevator of Whitaker Tower, watching the numbers climb toward the 48th floor. His reflection looked the way it always did. Controlled, expensive, untouched. But his mind was still at a bus stop under midnight rain, with a waitress laughing softly into her phone while the city moved around her like she was invisible. The elevator opened into a lobby of glass, steel, and quiet fear. Assistants moved quickly. Executives lowered their voices when he passed. At 36, Graham owned more hotel rooms than he had ever slept peacefully in. He could read a balance sheet in 90 seconds, end a failing partnership with one sentence, and make a room full of investors feel grateful for being corrected. Yet he had spent half the night unable to answer a simple question. Why had Nora Caldwell's dignity felt more powerful than his entire last name? "Your mother is waiting in your office," his assistant, Paige, said, matching his stride with a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. "Of course she is. She said it was urgent." "She says brunch reservations are urgent." Paige hesitated. "She also asked me whether we still use the same employment attorneys." Graham stopped walking. Paige's face stayed professional, but her eyes gave him the warning. "Thank you." He entered his office and found Evelyn Whitaker standing by the windows, Boston spread behind her in pale morning light. She had not sat down. Evelyn rarely sat when she wanted to win. A cream handbag rested on his desk like evidence. "You ignored my calls last night," she said. "I was thinking. That is what people say when they do not want to admit they were sulking." Graham removed his coat and placed it over the back of a chair. "Good morning to you too, Mother." Evelyn turned. "I spoke with Martin at Bellamy and Rose." His jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because someone has to protect our family from public disrespect." "You mean Nora?" "I mean a waitress who forgot herself." Graham moved behind his desk, but did not sit. She remembered herself very clearly. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Do not turn this into one of your moral exercises. That girl insulted me in a full dining room. After you told her people like her were trained to pick things up from the floor." It was a comment. It was cruelty wearing perfume. The words landed harder than he intended. Paige, outside the glass wall, suddenly became fascinated by her tablet. Evelyn stared at him. For a moment, Graham saw not the grand Mrs. Whitaker of charity boards and winter galas, but the woman who had raised him to believe image was a second skeleton, and shame was something other people had. "You sound like your father," she said softly. That was not praise. Graham looked away first. His father, Henry Whitaker, had been kind in rooms where kindness was considered inefficient. He had died 10 years earlier, leaving behind a hotel empire, a grieving son, and a wife who polished her sorrow into authority. "Father would have apologized," Graham said. Evelyn's mouth tightened. "Your father gave people too much room to disappoint him, and you give them no room to be human." Silence stretched between them, clean and cold. Then Evelyn reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded paper. "I asked Martin for her employee file." Graham's expression changed. "You had no right to do that. Do not be dramatic. It is a restaurant, not the Pentagon. It is her private information. It is basic background. Nora Caldwell, 28. Lives in South Boston. Father disabled. Left school years ago. No impressive connections. No family worth mentioning." Graham stepped forward. "Stop." Evelyn lifted her chin. "This is what I mean. You are making a symbol out of a woman you do not know because she embarrassed me beautifully. Maybe I want to know her because she embarrassed you honestly." Evelyn almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Be careful, Graham. Women like that understand opportunity." He looked at the paper in her hand as if it were something dirty. "No. People like us often mistake decency for strategy because strategy is all we practice." For once, Evelyn had no immediate reply. Graham took the folded employee file from her hand, walked to the shredder beside his desk, and fed it through without looking down. The machine hummed. Thin white strips fell into the bin. Evelyn watched, stunned. "You have become sentimental." Graham pressed the button until the last piece disappeared. "No, I have become embarrassed." Her face hardened. "By me." He met her eyes. "By how long I let you speak for both of us." Outside, the office seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn picked up her handbag slowly. "This is not over." Graham gave a tired smile. "With you, it rarely is." She left without another word, heels striking the marble like punctuation. Graham stood alone in the huge office, surrounded by awards, skyline, and silence. Then he turned to Paige, who was pretending very hard not to have heard everything. Cancel my lunch. Paige blinked. The meeting with the Denver investors? Move it to tomorrow. May I ask why? Graham looked toward the city below, where somewhere Nora Caldwell was probably carrying plates, answering politely, and refusing to let the world make her smaller. Because I owe someone an apology, he said. Paige nodded, then added carefully, should I order flowers? Graham thought of Nora's calm eyes, her worn sneakers, and the way she had laughed about microwaves in the rain. No, he said. I have a feeling flowers would make her suspicious. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Bellamy and Rose was almost empty, which made it the most honest version of itself. No champagne laughter. No diamond bracelets flashing under candlelight. Just folded napkins, polished silverware, and the tired hum of a restaurant preparing to become impressive again by dinner. Nora stood near the host's stand, reviewing reservation notes while Lily practiced opening a wine bottle at the service station. The court came out with a pop, so loud a busboy ducked behind a stack of menus. Nora looked over. Lily froze. Was that terrible? Nora considered it. Only if the wine was trying to keep a secret. Lily laughed, relieved, and tried again. Nora liked this hour. The room had space to breathe. For a few quiet minutes, she could almost pretend her life was not a careful arrangement of bills, bus schedules, medication reminders, and polite smiles offered to people who sometimes mistook service for surrender. Then the front door opened. Graham Whitaker walked in alone. No mother, no entourage, no sharp cloud of expensive perfume following him. Just Graham, in a dark overcoat, looking slightly out of place in a restaurant that had spent years trying to please men exactly like him. Nora saw him before the manager did. Of course she did. People with that much money entered rooms differently, even when they were trying not to. The heir seemed to check their reservation first. Martin, the manager, appeared from nowhere, smoothing his tie with both hands. Mr. Whitaker, we were not expecting you. That is all right, Graham said. I do not need a special table. Martin blinked, as though Graham had asked to wash dishes. A standard table will be fine, Graham added. Nora lowered her eyes to the reservation book to hide the smallest smile. Martin led him to a two-top by the window, the kind usually given to people who ordered soup and left exact change. Graham sat down and looked almost pleased by the demotion. Nora waited 30 seconds before approaching, because dignity also meant not rushing toward trouble just because it wore a tailored coat. Good afternoon, Mr. Whitaker, she said, placing a water glass on the table. Dining alone today? Yes. He paused. And Graham is fine. Of course, Mr. Whitaker. His mouth twitched. That felt intentional. It was professionally accidental. For the first time, he laughed. Not the polished laugh of boardrooms. A real one. Brief, surprised, human. Nora handed him the lunch menu. Would you like a few minutes? Graham opened the menu and studied it, as if it might contain a merger clause. What do people order when they are not trying to impress anyone? Usually fries. He looked up. You serve fries here? We call them pommes frites, so people feel better about paying $14. His smile deepened. Then I will have those. Excellent choice. Would you like the food, or the pronunciation? He lowered the menu slowly. I deserve that. Probably. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes betrayed the humor. Graham leaned back. I came to apologize. The words settled between them, simple and unadorned. Nora did not respond immediately. She adjusted the edge of the menu on the table, aligning it with the fork. For your mother? For myself first. That made her look at him. I should have spoken sooner, he said. Last night, at the table, I saw what happened, and I let the room decide whether it was acceptable before I did. Nora studied him with a quietness that made him feel less like a billionaire and more like a student who had not prepared. That is a very expensive sentence, she said. Did a public relations team write it? No. They would have added the word unfortunate. A corner of her mouth lifted. True. Nora, I am sorry. This time, there was no performance in it. No polished apology designed to protect reputation. Just a man sitting by a window, trying to place the truth carefully on the table without knocking anything over. Nora nodded once. Thank you. He waited, as if forgiveness might arrive with a receipt. It did not. She took out her order pad. So, Pommes frites. Anything else? Graham blinked. That is it. That is what an apology gets you. Acknowledged. Not upgraded. He looked at her, then laughed again, softer this time. Fair enough. As Nora walked away, Graham watched the restaurant move around her. She corrected Lily's posture with a whisper. She noticed a table near the back had been set with the wrong dessert spoon. She intercepted a delivery man before he blocked the entrance. Nothing dramatic. Nothing grand. But everywhere Nora passed, small problems disappeared. A few minutes later, an older woman at table 6 began coughing after sipping water too quickly. Before anyone panicked, Nora was already there, one hand steadying the chair, her voice calm and low. Take your time. Slow breath. You are all right. The woman recovered, embarrassed. Nora smiled as if nothing awkward had happened. The water here has a flair for drama. The woman laughed. So did her husband. Graham saw it then. Nora did not just serve food. She protected people from feeling small. When she returned with his fries, he looked at the plate, then at her. You are very good at this. Carrying potatoes? Making people feel safe. Nora's expression shifted, just slightly. Not enough for most people to catch. Graham caught it. That is not on the menu, she said. Maybe it should be. Before she could answer, Martin hurried from the back office, pale and tense, clutching the phone. His eyes darted toward Nora, then Graham, then Nora again. Nora, he said carefully. Mrs. Whitaker just called. The warmth left the air. Graham set down his fork. Nora did not move. Martin swallowed. She is hosting a charity dinner Friday night at the Whitaker Crown Hotel. She requested our staff. He hesitated. And she specifically requested you. Graham's face hardened. Nora looked toward the window, where afternoon rain had begun tapping lightly against the glass. Then she picked up the empty tray against her hip and smiled with practiced grace. Well, she said, I suppose some napkins get dropped twice. Friday evening arrived with the kind of cold that made Boston sidewalks shine like glass. The Whitaker Crown Hotel rose above Back Bay with its brass doors, heated awning, and lobby flowers arranged so perfectly they looked afraid to wilt. Inside, the charity dinner had already begun. To glow, cameras flashed near the step and repeat. Donors in dark suits and winter pearls drifted beneath chandeliers the size of small weather systems. A string quartet played something elegant enough to make people lower their voices. Nora Caldwell entered through the service entrance carrying a garment bag, 3 pens, and the quiet knowledge that Evelyn Whitaker had not invited her there by accident. The staff hallway smelled of coffee, steam, and expensive perfume leaking in from the ballroom. Martin walked beside her, whispering instructions too quickly. Smile, keep moving, avoid long conversations, and whatever happens, please do not say anything about dignity near a microphone. Nora looked at him. Was that in the contract? It was in my blood pressure. Lily, walking behind them with a tray of polished glasses, whispered, For what it is worth, I brought backup shoes and emotional support mitts. Nora almost laughed. You are becoming very prepared for fine dining. Fine dining is mostly fear with better lighting. The ballroom doors opened, and the noise washed over them. 300 guests. White roses. Gold table numbers. A stage at the far end with a podium bearing the Whitaker Foundation crest. At the center of it all stood Evelyn Whitaker, smiling for photographs with the polished warmth of a fireplace no one was allowed to touch. Graham stood near her, speaking with a senator, but his eyes found Nora almost immediately. He did not wave. He did not make a scene. He simply looked at her with a question in his face. Are you all right? Nora answered with the smallest lift of her chin. I am working. Evelyn saw the exchange. Her smile did not move, but something behind it sharpened. Within minutes, Nora was assigned to the VIP section, exactly as expected. Her tables included donors who treated charity like a social sport, board members who spoke in initials, and one man who asked whether the soup was locally humble. Nora served them all with the same calm precision. Then Evelyn approached, one hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. Conversation softened around her. Everyone, she said, voice bright and practiced. I believe some of you. Remember the young woman I mentioned? This is Nora Caldwell from Bellamy and Rose. Heads turned. Nora stood with a tray of champagne flutes balanced at shoulder height. Evelyn continued. Nora recently reminded me that dignity is very important. Such a charming lesson to receive during dinner service. A few guests chuckled, unsure whether they had permission to laugh fully. Nora felt the room tilt toward her. Not with kindness, with curiosity. People liked discomfort when it was not theirs. Graham took one step forward, but Nora moved first. She lowered the tray to the table with graceful control, then turned to Evelyn. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. I have found dignity matters most in rooms where people can afford everything else." The chuckle stopped. Not dramatically, just enough. A woman near the front blinked into her champagne. Someone cleared his throat. Graham pressed his lips together, hiding what might have been a smile. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "How thoughtful." "I try, ma'am." Nora picked up the tray and continued serving, as if she had merely explained the salad dressing. For the next hour, Evelyn tested her in ways too small for anyone else to call cruel. She sent back coffee because it was too hot, then because it was no longer hot enough. She asked Nora to move a centerpiece 3 inches to the left, then back again. She introduced her to a donor as the philosophical waitress, which made Lily drop a spoon into a bread basket and whisper, "At least you sound expensive." Nora did not break. Her feet hurt. Her smile thinned. But she did not break. Graham watched from across the ballroom, his irritation growing with every small humiliation. He knew his mother's methods. She rarely raised her voice. She preferred velvet pressure. She could make a person feel dismissed while complimenting their posture. But Nora kept slipping out from under it, not by fighting, but by refusing to shrink. Near 8:30, as dessert plates were being staged, Evelyn stepped toward the podium for her keynote speech. The room settled. Cameras lifted. Donors turned their faces toward the stage. Behind the curtain, Nora passed the event table carrying a tray of coffee cups. When she noticed a printed speech resting beside a stack of programs, a number caught her eye, then another. She stopped, not because she was nosy, because the figures were wrong. The foundation's youth housing grant was listed as $2.8 million. Nora knew the number. She had helped families apply through the Partner Center in South Boston. The real amount was $800,000. A mistake like that would not just embarrass Evelyn. It would make the entire foundation look dishonest. Nora looked toward the podium. Evelyn was adjusting the microphone, smiling at a ballroom full of cameras. Graham was on the far side of the room, trapped by a donor with a red face and a long story. Nora looked at the paper again. Her jaw tightened. For one quiet second, she had a choice. Let the woman who had humiliated her humiliate herself, or protect the truth because the truth deserved better than revenge. Nora set down the coffee tray and reached for the speech. Nora did not have time to ask permission from anyone who would have wasted it. Evelyn was already at the podium, one hand resting near the microphone, her smile polished for cameras and donors. The ballroom lights softened. The quartet faded into a final note. 300 people turned their attention toward the stage, unaware that one wrong number on one white sheet of paper was about to turn kindness into scandal. Nora scanned the speech once more. $2.8 million. It appeared 3 times. Not a typo in passing. A headline waiting to happen. Her fingers tightened around the paper. She could hear Evelyn's voice from the stage. "Good evening, friends, partners, and generous supporters of the Whitaker Foundation." Applause rose and fell like polite rain. Behind the curtain, an event assistant with a headset hurried past, carrying a clipboard and the expression of someone one spilled sauce away from quitting. Nora stepped into his path. "I need the final speech draft." He blinked. "Excuse me. Mrs. Whitaker has the wrong version." "Who are you?" "The person standing between you and a very expensive morning on the news." That made him stop. Nora held up the page and pointed to the grant number. "This is wrong. The South Boston Youth Housing Grant was $800,000, not $2.8 million. If she says this out loud, every reporter in the room will ask where the extra $2 million went." The assistant's face drained. "Oh no. Yes, that is the professional term." He fumbled with his clipboard. "The corrected draft is in the media packet folder, but I cannot get to the printer room, and she is already speaking." Nora looked toward the stage. Evelyn had just begun thanking the board. She had maybe 90 seconds before the first bad number. Maybe less. "Signal the sound booth," Nora said. "Have them extend the foundation video by 30 seconds after her opening remarks." "I cannot just change the program." Nora looked at him calmly. "You can either change the program or update your resume." He nodded so fast his headset slipped. Nora moved. Not rushed. Precise. She crossed behind the stage, past stacked chairs and flower crates, through a service corridor where two banquet captains were arguing over missing dessert forks. Printer room, she asked. One pointed left without pausing the argument. Nora found the room, opened the media folder on the computer, and searched for the corrected draft. Her heart was steady now. This was restaurant timing. A table waiting, a sauce breaking, a guest allergic to walnuts, a bride crying in the restroom because the cake had the wrong initials. Problems were just fires that did not need flames. She printed 3 pages. The machine took its time, making soft mechanical sounds as if it had never once cared about human urgency. Come on, Nora whispered. Today would be lovely. The pages slid out. She grabbed them and returned to the ballroom corridor just as the foundation video began playing on the large screens. Children smiling. Volunteers painting walls. Donors nodding with public tenderness. 30 seconds. Nora reached the side of the stage, but Evelyn's original speech was already on the podium. The assistant looked at her helplessly from across the curtain. Too many eyes. Too many cameras. Nora glanced at the table beside the podium. A silver water pitcher. A stack of programs. A small arrangement of white roses. She picked up the pitcher and stepped onto the edge of the stage as if she belonged there. The room barely noticed her. Servers were invisible until they made a mistake. Nora used that. She approached the podium just as the video ended, and Evelyn turned back to the microphone. Your water, Mrs. Whitaker, Nora said softly. Evelyn's eyes sharpened with irritation, but she kept smiling for the crowd. I did not ask for water. No, ma'am, Nora said, placing the glass down. But you will want the correct speech. Evelyn's smile froze. Nora slid the new pages over the old ones with the grace of someone replacing a fork. For 1 second, Evelyn looked down. She saw the corrected numbers. Her eyes moved across the page. Understanding arrived. Then fear. Small but real. Nora stepped back before anyone could read the moment. Evelyn lifted her chin and continued. Tonight, we celebrate $800,000 in direct housing support for families across South Boston. Applause filled the ballroom. Clean. Warm. Earned. Nora returned to the side curtain, where the event assistant mouthed, "Thank you," with the desperation of a man who had just kept his health insurance. Across the room, Graham had finally escaped the donor and was watching the stage. He had seen enough. Not all of it. Enough. He saw his mother's hand rest on the corrected pages. He saw Nora standing half in shadow, holding the discarded draft. He saw the choice she had made. She had been handed a chance to let Evelyn fall in front of everyone. Instead, she had saved her. Not because Evelyn deserved it. Because Nora refused to become smaller just to prove a point. When Evelyn's speech ended, the room rose in applause. Cameras flashed. Donors smiled. The foundation's name remained untouched. Evelyn stepped down from the stage with her head high, but her fingers still gripped the pages. Graham moved toward Nora, but she was already picking up the coffee tray she had abandoned earlier. Lily appeared beside her, whispering, "Did you just rescue the queen after she tried to feed you to the peasants?" Nora handed her 2 cups. Less commentary. More decaf. That was a yes. Nora almost smiled, but her eyes moved to Evelyn, who stood near the stage receiving compliments she had nearly lost the right to accept. For a brief moment, Evelyn looked back at Nora. No thank you came. Only a tight, unreadable stare. Graham saw that too, and something in him settled. Quietly. Finally, a line had been drawn, not between rich and poor, not between mother and waitress, but between those who used power to protect pride and those who used grace to protect truth. The applause followed Evelyn Whitaker all the way off the stage. It wrapped around her like silk, bright and expensive, and for a few minutes she allowed herself to stand in it. Donors touched her arm. Reporters asked for photos. Board members congratulated her on a beautiful speech, a meaningful speech, a speech that showed real heart. Evelyn smiled for every camera, tilted her chin for every flash, accepted every compliment with the ease of a woman who had spent her life being praised for rooms other people prepared. But her fingers never released the corrected pages. They had become heavier than paper. Across the ballroom, Nora continued service. Coffee, dessert, fresh forks, quiet answers. She moved through the crowd with the same measured calm, though her feet ached and the side of her thumb was marked red from the hot coffee tray. Lily followed behind her, still buzzing with the dangerous excitement of having witnessed rich people nearly become news. "You know," Lily whispered, "if I had saved someone from public embarrassment, I would at least expect a muffin basket." Nora set a cup beside a donor. "Aim higher." "A fruit basket?" "Aim more realistic." "A sincere thank you?" Nora glanced toward Evelyn, who was laughing softly with a museum trustee as if nothing had happened. "Now you are just fantasizing." Lily covered a smile with her napkin stack. For one brief second, the night almost felt manageable. Then Evelyn turned and looked directly at Nora. Not with gratitude, not even with confusion, with accusation. A few minutes later, as the guests drifted toward the silent auction tables, a hotel staff member approached Nora. "Mrs. Whitaker would like to see you in the East Service Lounge." Lily's face fell. That sounds like where smiles go to be legally removed. Nora handed her the tray. "Keep table 12 away from the regular coffee. The man in the blue tie already thinks the dessert spoon is a political statement." "Nora," Lily's voice softened. "Do you want me to get Mr. Whitaker?" Nora looked across the ballroom. Graham was speaking with 2 foundation board members, but his attention kept shifting in her direction. "No," she said. "I do not need rescuing from a conversation." The East Service Lounge was not really a lounge. It was a narrow room behind the ballroom with a leather couch no one sat on, a sideboard with untouched bottled water, and a mirror framed in gold for guests who wanted to check whether generosity photographed well. Evelyn stood near the mirror, still holding the speech. The moment Nora entered, the air tightened. "Close the door," Evelyn said. Nora did. Not because she was ordered to. Because open doors turned private ugliness into public theater, and Nora had already cleaned up enough messes tonight. Evelyn turned slowly. "You had no right to interfere with my speech." Nora folded her hands in front of her apron. "The numbers were wrong." "You think I do not know that?" Nora paused. "I think you knew after I showed you." Evelyn's mouth hardened. "Do not be clever with me." "I am not trying to be clever." "Then what were you trying to be?" "Useful." The word landed wrong. Evelyn seized it. "Exactly. Useful. That is what you were tonight. And do not mistake usefulness for worth, Miss Caldwell." The sentence was quiet, polished, cruel enough to leave no fingerprints. Nora looked at her for a long moment. Outside the door, distant laughter floated from the ballroom. Forks touched plates. A photographer called for one more smile. The world continued, unaware that a line had just been crossed in a small room with bottled water and a gold mirror. Nora reached up and removed her service badge. Slowly, carefully, she placed it on the sideboard between them. The small plastic rectangle made almost no sound. Somehow, Evelyn flinched. Nora's voice remained low. "You are right, Mrs. Whitaker. Usefulness is not worth. That is why I never confused your money with your character." Evelyn's face changed. Not much. Just enough for the mask to slip at one corner. "How dare you?" The door opened before Nora could answer. Graham stood there. He had heard enough. Not everything. Enough. His eyes moved from Nora's badge on the sideboard to his mother's face, then back to Nora. Something in his expression settled into sadness before it became resolve. "Mother," he said. Evelyn straightened. "This is a private conversation." "No," Graham said. "It is a pattern." Nora looked at him, surprised by the quiet force in his voice. He stepped into the room and did not stand between them like a hero in a story. He stood beside Nora. That was worse for Evelyn. Much worse. "She saved your name tonight," Graham said. "And somehow, you still tried to take hers." Evelyn's eyes flashed. "You are embarrassing yourself over a waitress." Graham nodded slowly, as if the word had clarified everything. "No, I am finally embarrassed by what I have allowed around me." The room went still. Evelyn looked at her son as if he had spoken a language she had refused to learn. "You will regret speaking to me this way." "I already regret waiting this long." Nora exhaled softly. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. This was not victory. It was grief with better posture. Graham turned to her. "Nora, I am sorry." She looked at him, then at the badge. "You apologize more honestly than most people order dinner." A faint, unexpected laugh escaped him. Even Evelyn blinked. Nora picked up the badge, not to put it back on, but to hold it one last time. "Please tell Martin I finished my shift." Graham's face tightened. "You are leaving?" "Yes." "Because of her?" Nora shook her head. "Because of me." She opened the door and stepped back into the hallway, the noise of the ballroom swelling around her. Graham followed a few steps behind, not touching her, not stopping her, just walking with her until they reached the service entrance. The cold Boston air waited outside. Nora slipped on her coat. Graham stood there in his tailored suit, looking suddenly less like a billionaire and more like a man who had just lost an excuse. "Can I drive you home?" he asked. Nora looked at the Blacktown car near the curb, then back at him. "I take the bus. It is 28 degrees. Then the bus and I have something in common. We both keep showing up." He almost smiled, but the sadness stayed. "Will I see you again?" Nora pulled her scarf around her neck. "That depends, Graham." "On what?" She stepped into the cold with her badge in her pocket and her dignity intact. "On whether you are looking for a waitress to defend or a woman to respect." Then she walked toward the bus stop, leaving him beneath the hotel lights, while behind him, for the first time in his life, the Whitaker name felt smaller than the woman walking away from it. For 3 days, Graham Whitaker did not go to Bellamy and Rose. Not because he was avoiding Nora, because Nora no longer worked there, and for the first time in his adult life, money could not put someone back where he wanted them to be. He asked Martin only once where she had gone. Martin, looking like a man who had aged 6 months in one weekend, said, "She resigned properly, finished her tables, tipped out the bussers, and left the walk-in inventory more organized than my marriage." That was all. Graham did not ask Paige to run a background search. He did not call in favors. He did not send flowers. He remembered her question at the hotel curb and let it sit where it belonged, heavy and exact. Was he looking for a waitress to defend or a woman to respect? On Wednesday evening, respect led him to a community center in South Boston, not through a private investigator, but through a flyer he found taped inside the lobby of one of his own hotels. Free hospitality skills workshop. Interview practice. Guest service training. Instructor, Nora Caldwell. The paper was crooked. The words were plain. Somehow, it felt more important than the framed awards in his office. The center was a brick building between a laundromat and a small grocery store with hand-painted signs in the window. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed above folding chairs and a coffee urn that sounded like it was reconsidering life. Graham arrived in a navy overcoat with a bouquet of white roses in one hand, then immediately realized the mistake. The room was full of people practicing introductions, carrying trays, and learning how to fold napkins into shapes that suggested confidence. Nora stood at the front in jeans, a soft gray sweater, and sneakers. No apron, no badge, no polished restaurant armor. She was demonstrating how to handle a difficult guest without apologizing for existing. "You can be kind without being small," she told the class. "There is a difference." Then she saw him. Her expression did not change, but the room somehow noticed. A woman in the front row whispered, "That is a very tall apology." Nora heard it. Graham heard it. Several people pretended not to. Graham cleared his throat. "I can come back." Nora looked at the flowers, then at him. "Those roses look expensive enough to need their own tax advisor." A few students laughed. Graham glanced down at the bouquet with honest regret. "I panicked in a florist." Clearly, the florist seemed confident. Florists are trained to sense guilt. He nodded. "That explains the ribbon." More laughter. The tension loosened, but Nora did not move toward him. She turned back to the class. "Everyone, take 5 minutes. Practice the tray carry with water glasses only. If anyone uses coffee, I will consider it a personal betrayal." The students scattered into small groups. Nora walked to Graham near the back table. Up close, he noticed she looked tired, but not defeated. There was a pencil tucked behind her ear and a small ink mark on her wrist. "You found my class," she said. "A flyer found me. That sounds less alarming." He set the flowers on a chair because holding them had begun to feel like holding a confession. "I came to apologize, not to impress you." Nora folded her arms. "That is a better opening than the roses. I am learning." Slowly, painfully, she almost smiled. Almost. Graham looked around the room. A young man in a thrift store blazer was practicing eye contact with Lily, who had apparently followed Nora into the community project. An older woman was balancing 3 empty plates with the focus of an astronaut docking a spacecraft. Walter Caldwell sat near the coffee urn in a wheelchair, wearing a cardigan and watching Graham with open suspicion. "Is that your father?" Graham asked softly. Nora followed his gaze. "Yes." That is Walter. Walter raised 2 fingers in a greeting that felt more like a background check. Graham lifted a hand. Walter called across the room. Are you the billionaire? Nora closed her eyes. Graham answered, Yes, sir. Walter nodded gravely. Do you know how to mop? The room went silent for half a second, then broke into laughter. Graham looked at Nora. I suspect this is a test. Everything is a test when Walter has coffee. Walter pointed toward a storage closet. Spill near the entry. Yellow bucket. No one respects a man who cannot find a mop. Graham removed his overcoat, rolled up his sleeves, and went to the closet without argument. Nora watched him return with the wrong bucket, then the right bucket, then too many paper towels. For 10 quiet minutes, Graham Whitaker, owner of luxury hotels across the country, cleaned a community center floor while a retired school librarian instructed him on circular motions. He did not complain. He did not perform humility. He simply did the work badly, then better. Nora saw that. When he finished, his shirt cuff was damp and his hair had fallen slightly out of place. Walter inspected the floor. Acceptable for upper management. Graham smiled. High praise. Nora handed him a paper cup of coffee. Careful. It is not single origin. Will I survive? Barely. He took a sip and winced. That is a beverage with unresolved anger. This time Nora laughed. Really laughed. It changed the room for him. Not because it meant he was forgiven. Because it meant she was still willing to let joy enter. Later, after the class ended and the chairs were stacked, Graham stood beside her near the door while snow began to fall lightly outside. I spoke to my mother, he said. I told her I would not allow her to use my name as permission to belittle people. Nora looked out at the snow. And she accused me of choosing a stranger over family. Were you? Graham shook his head. I was choosing the kind of man I can live with. Nora was quiet. Then she reached for the white roses, removed one from the bouquet, and handed the rest to a student who had admired them earlier. Graham watched, amused and humbled. You gave away my apology. No, Nora said, tucking the single rose into an empty coffee cup on the table. I kept the part one believed. He looked at the rose, then at her. Outside, the snow softened the sidewalk, the streetlights, the city that had once seemed built only for people like him. Nora picked up her coat. There is a diner 2 blocks away, she said. They serve fries without making them French. Graham's heart shifted. Quietly, carefully. Is that an invitation? She opened the door and let the cold air in. It is dinner. Do not get dramatic. He smiled and followed her into the snow, leaving the expensive bouquet behind, taking only the part of the apology she had allowed him to keep. 6 months later, the ballroom at the Whitaker Crown Hotel looked different. The chandeliers were the same. The white roses were the same. The marble floors still held the reflection of every expensive shoe that crossed them. But the room felt less like a museum of wealth and more like a place where something useful might finally happen. At the front, a simple sign stood beside the podium. The Walter Caldwell Service Scholarship. No gold crest above Nora's name. No photograph of a sad family. No dramatic slogan about saving people. Just a promise printed in clean black letters. Training, tuition support, and career placement for hospitality workers rebuilding their lives. Nora stood near the entrance in a navy dress and low heels, checking the seating chart with the concentration of someone who trusted paper more than people with microphones. Graham watched her from across the room, speaking with a hotel board member while failing completely to follow the conversation. Nora had not become softer in 6 months. If anything, she had become more herself. She still corrected him when he used business language to avoid feelings. She still ordered fries at elegant restaurants just to watch him defend the menu. She still visited her father every Sunday with groceries, books, and a strict refusal to let Walter buy anything advertised on late-night television. But now, when Graham looked at her, he no longer saw the woman who had walked away from his world. He saw the woman who had made him build a better doorway into it. Walter Caldwell sat in the front row wearing a new suit and the expression of a man who suspected the chair cost more than his first car. Lily stood beside him, now a training coordinator for the scholarship program, whispering something that made him laugh into his sleeve. Martin from Bellamy and Rose hovered near the dessert table, pretending not to be emotional while reorganizing spoons that did not need help. Then the room quieted. Evelyn Whitaker had arrived. Conversations shifted, but not with the old fear. People had heard stories. Not all of them accurate. most of them involving a napkin, a speech, and a waitress who had somehow made half of Boston rethink table manners. Evelyn wore a pale blue suit, less severe than usual, and pearls that looked almost modest, at least by Evelyn's standards. Graham turned, guarded. Nora did not move. Evelyn walked toward her slowly, passing the donors, the hotel executives, the students, the servers, and every silent memory in the room. For the first time, she stopped in front of Nora without looking down. "Miss Caldwell," Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, but not polished enough to hide the effort. "I owe you an apology." The air tightened. Graham took half a step forward, then stopped himself. Nora had never needed him to manage her dignity. Nora looked at Evelyn for a long moment. "Then make it a real one." A tiny sound moved through the room. Someone pretending to cough. Someone else holding back surprise. Evelyn's fingers touched the edge of her handbag. Old habits searching for armor. Then she let her hand fall. "I was cruel to you," she said. "Not because you lacked worth. Because I was afraid you would make my son see what I had become." Graham's face changed. Nora's did not, though her eyes softened by a fraction. Evelyn continued, quieter now. "You protected my reputation when I had done nothing to protect yours. I have thought about that more than I wanted to." Walter leaned toward Lily and whispered, "That is rich lady for I was wrong." Lily whispered back, "Progress comes in dialects." Nora heard them. So did Graham. Somehow no one laughed. "Not yet." Nora nodded once. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker." Evelyn seemed to wait for more. Forgiveness, perhaps. A clean ending tied with ribbon. Nora did not offer one. She offered something better. "You are welcome to support the program." Quietly, Evelyn blinked. Then, to everyone's surprise, she nodded. "Quietly may be good for me." This time, the laughter came gently. Graham stepped to the podium a few minutes later, but he did not give the speech his public relations team had written. He folded the paper, placed it aside, and looked at the scholarship students in the first rows. "My father used to say that service is not standing beneath someone. It is choosing to notice what others need before they ask." His eyes moved to Nora. "It took me far too long to understand that the people who keep rooms together are often the ones the room forgets to thank." Nora looked down, embarrassed despite herself. Walter dabbed his eyes with a napkin and muttered, "Dusty ballroom." After the applause, after the photos, after the first scholarship recipients hugged their families near the stage, Nora slipped onto the hotel balcony for air. Boston glittered beneath her, cold and beautiful, the streets silver from a light spring rain. Graham found her there, carrying 2 small plates. "I rescued dessert before Martin organized it by height." Nora accepted one. Brave. Reckless, some would say. She glanced at his plate. "Is that the appetizer you still cannot pronounce?" "I have improved." "Prove it." He tried. Failed immediately. Nora laughed, the sound warm against the rain. Graham smiled, then grew quiet. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" She looked at him. "We have had dinner before." "Not like that." His voice softened. "Not as a project. Not as an apology. Not as a billionaire trying to become decent before dessert." Nora turned toward him fully. "As what then?" Graham held her gaze. "As Graham. A man who respects you. A man who likes you. A man who is very willing to be corrected on French appetizers for the rest of his life." The city hummed. Below them, Nora let the silence breathe. Then she reached for his hand. Not dramatically, just naturally, as if it had been waiting there long enough. "Dinner," she said. "One condition. Anything. No roses with tax advisors." He laughed, and she smiled, and behind the glass doors the ballroom kept glowing, full of people learning, slowly, that dignity was never part of the uniform. She did not raise her voice. She raised the standard. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to When He Chose Her channel for more emotional stories about dignity, love, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to be broken by the world. Every like and share helps us keep telling stories that remind us of kindness still matters.